Should a man be a thinker or a doer? Neither thought nor action is much use without the other, and when they're disconnected, either can be destructive. But people have a tendency to over-specialize, becoming pigeonholed as either thinkers or doers. Stick around for some real talk on how to balance your active and contemplative sides and get them working together to propel you toward your goals. The world suffers from a disconnect between thinkers and doers. It needs people who can bridge that divide, whether men or not. But masculinity does play into this contrast, as it does with most things. Maybe you've heard it said, probably by a high-achieving woman, that the men in the organization do a lot of talking while the women do a lot of doing. Maybe the guys are talking out their deep thoughts, but more likely she's implying they just run their mouths and rule by PowerPoint, while the women add the real value. Obviously, you don't want to be the kind of underwhelming, overconfident man who thinks he's God's gift to Earth but has neither original ideas nor a big impact. But cartoon masculinity can just as easily lead men to believe we should be one-sided sages, never dirtying our hands with the nitty-gritty, or else action figures who fear thinking is effeminate. You might be more likely to encounter the first kind of cartoon masculinity if you work in the corporate world, where the fetishes of manhood are thought leadership, data, and of course, flashy slide decks. If you work with your hands, you might run into more of the anti-intellectual version of cartoon manliness, and you might at some point in your life have made a choice to rebel against one kind of one-sided masculinity only to take refuge in the other. One-sided thinkers. Men, or anyone really, who gets stuck in a thinking rut and can't seem to manifest their ideas in reality might have one of these problems. Thinker Trap 1. Perfectionism. If you obsess over whether something hidden in your head is good enough to see the light of day, you might have gotten the idea somewhere in life that everything you put out there is evidence of your worth or worthlessness. A lot of us get this kind of fixed mindset from traditional schooling. One way to psych yourself out and get over perfectionism and imposter syndrome is to spend some time looking at what your competition puts out into the world. You'll probably be shocked at how shamelessly mediocre very successful people seem to be. As a perfectionist, it might even be painful or vicariously embarrassing to look at shoddy work. But make yourself do it and you might find some new courage to put your own work out there. Because even if it's not good enough, it's better than the junk that's getting all the attention. Thinker Trap 2. Lack of efficacy. Another driver of analysis paralysis is the belief that whatever you do won't make a big difference. The sense that you can make a dent in the universe is called efficacy, and a lack of it can keep you stuck in your head forever. Lack of efficacy can emerge from the underside of a deep thinker's strengths, because he's so good at seeing the big picture he might look to himself like just an ant from 30,000 feet. A great antidote to lack of efficacy comes from Antonio Gramsci. Jailed by the fascist government of Italy in the 1920s, this deep thinker had plenty of reason to feel pessimistic about his ability to change the world. But he continued to urge his supporters on the outside to practice pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. Even if it's objectively true that the odds are stacked against you, if you don't act as if there's hope, you guarantee there won't be. This optimism of the will is almost like a secular version of Pascal's wager. It's better to behave as if God exists, even if you have intellectual doubts, because the downside risk of damnation is so great and believing is unlikely to make the situation any worse. It's a lopsided risk-reward, and behaving as if you can make an impact is no different. What about rash actors? What makes them fail to look before they leap? Doer Trap 1. Low information doers. Some guys, to put it nicely, aren't cursed with excessive introspection. They act impulsively and don't even know they're being impulsive. Excessive confidence and not knowing what you don't know can lead to a lot of rash actions. It's easy not to overthink something if you're not even aware of the risks or the questions you should be asking. The cause of such blindness is usually a lack of reading, listening, and otherwise paying attention to the wider world. History, current events, and really any intelligent media diet or social circle will make you aware of at least some of the things you should be worrying about. Some people, though, manage to switch off their brains the second they clock out, and so they go to work in the morning none the wiser about the cliff they might be driving towards. Doer Trap 2. Lulled by eggheads. The irony is that some of these guys act rashly on what they think to be very sage advice. Think Bush 2 going headlong into the Iraq quagmire, armed with the two neat theories of Pentagon eggheads. Or think hotshot bankers in 2007 armed with flashy models cooked up by astrophysics quants that said they were taking no risk. And of course, the disasters of authoritarian communism and fascism are the ultimate examples of two neat theories being implemented by doers who don't know what they don't know, or who simply don't care. Kernels of truth. The interesting thing is, like all caricatures, there's a kernel of truth about masculinity in both the cartoon thinker and the cartoon doer. A degree of detachment is a real masculine virtue, the ability to be unfazed by events and maintain a critical distance. But as the ancients understood, the masterful man can throw himself into action without losing that stoic mental distance. A classic, if extreme example of this virtue can be found in the Bhagavad Gita, in which Arjuna must overcome a cosmic case of analysis paralysis and go into battle against his own kinsmen while maintaining an almost inhumanly philosophical perspective. This ancient story nails it. The real Superman is the one who can fuse total commitment to action and total contemplative distance. He's not a man with either thinking or doing muscles that are roided out while the other set atrophies. Find your opposite squad. If you're a deep thinker but prone to analysis paralysis, you need to surround yourself with action-oriented people who will kick your butt and keep you moving toward implementing your ideas in the real world. If you tend to spring into action without waiting around to consider the nuances, then you probably need some thoughtful friends and coworkers to help you pause and reflect. You also need to figure out whether other people tend to lubricate your thinking and doing, or whether they tend to be sand in your gears. Some people think by talking and need to process frequently with trusted friends or coworkers in order to reflect on the day. Others can't hear themselves think unless they're alone. On the action side, some of us need the courage and accountability that come from a crowd, but some just get distracted by other people and need to buckle down alone to get stuff done. You've probably experienced both at some point in your life. So the path forward is to increase your metacognition, becoming more self-aware of when other people are pushing you forward and when they're throwing you off. The disconnect between what's in our heads and what's out there in the world is one of our defining characteristics as humans, and bridging it is the work of achieving our potential. Like everything alive, the dynamic between human thought and human action is just that, a dynamic. We need a constant flow between our inner and outer worlds, or both will get very out of whack. It's not easy, nor is there an end to the process, a time when we're done trying to connect contemplation and action. The key is to keep the flywheel spinning, keep the feedback loop going, keep walking as you talk and learning as you lead, to bring back the civil rights slogan from our last video. Because by itself, thinking is brittle. It only gains tensile strength and anti-fragility by repeated, painful contact with reality. And without infusions of new, disruptive ideas, action becomes brittle and robotic too. The same patterns laid down and ossified into groupthink repeat themselves as humans march through their routines like automatons. Of course, some of that habit is necessary. If we had to think about every action, we literally would be paralyzed. But it's in the very clash of pristine ideas and plodding implementation that both are brought to life.